Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. And now, this has been a long time coming, but finally, we are at the final Transformers Cyberverse review, and honestly, I've been doing these reviews for about almost 3 to 4 months now, and it's really sad now to be that we're at the end, but honestly though, I'm so glad I actually decided to go back and finish Cyberverse, because this show has been an absolute blast to watch. Honestly, it's up there with Prime, and probably, like, animated. Like, I haven't finished watching Transformers animated yet, but it's up there with Prime and anime. It's definitely one of my 3 favorite Transformers shows of all time. I'd reckon, like, it's almost as good as Transformers Prime. Like, this honestly, like, aside from a few episodes, Cyberverse was really, really good show. And, yeah, this final episode, man, it really, really sets it home. And honestly, I'm so happy to say that this final episode of Cyberverse does the series justice and leaves the show ending on a very, very good note. So for today's review, which is going to be the final review of Transformers Cyberverse, we're going to be looking at Transformers Cyberverse Season 4, Episode 2, The Perfect Decepticon. And man, this episode has just been so good. Like, honestly though, the way the other one ended back in Season 3, that could have been the series finale and I would have been fine with that. But this, honestly, it makes me so glad that the other one wasn't, because this is so much of a better finale, and I didn't even think it was possible. This is without a doubt the best possible way that Boulder Media could have finished Cyberverse, and I'm so glad they decided to do this, because it really, really was amazing. So we're going to go ahead and see what makes this, in my opinion, the best episode of Transformers Cyberverse ever. The final episode of Cyberverse Perfect Decepticon starts off presumably like a little bit of time after the Immobilizers, where it ended with the Dinobots freezing Trypticon outside the right outside the Autobot and Decepticon border. We see that the border has been taken down, and Optimus has essentially done some reconstruction with Skybites and the rest of the Autobots and Decepticons to turn Trypticon into sort of like a tourist attraction for Cybertronians, calling it Trypticon Plaza. So in a kind of macabre sense, they've taken Trypticon's frozen body, and just to remind you, Trypticon's still alive. He's just forever frozen, having to let people just go around shopping by him. So Optimus is basically just like announcing the grand opening of Trypticon Plaza, where they have Trypticon strung up with all these different celebratory, like, festive lights, and they've got tents for everything. And honestly, it's a funny little way to start off this episode, with Optimus opening up Trypticon Plaza and just all the Autobots, Decepticons just looking around, before suddenly a portal opens in the sky, a multiversal portal, and Astro Train emerges for it covered in fire. And so he crash lands in the middle of Trypticon Plaza in front of all the Autobots and Decepticons, where he's been severely injured, and Optimus wonders what happened to Astro Train. He's feared if Megatron X broke out of him and that he's going to come back. However, Astro Train says that something much worse is coming, but then dies. So that leads us to what exactly the new threat is now that Astro Train's dead, and presumably something worse than Megatron X is coming. After this, though, we cut to the intro for this episode, and I'm so happy to say that they actually changed the intro for this episode compared to the one they used in the Immobilizers. Now, just to say again, I really did like the intro that they did for the Immobilizers, but I'm so glad they changed the intro one last time for this final episode. So similarly to how the intro for the Immobilizers started, it does start with a repeat of the first part of the Season 1 opening, where it shows the 2 Seekers coming out of the space bridge, and then it shows through Bumblebee's memories, focusing on the one of Soundwave, which replaced the one from Starscream back in Season 1. However, this time, instead of like in the Immobilizers, where we had all the Dinobots running on the different tracks outside of Cybertron, and then combined into Volcanicus amongst all the frozen Autobots and Decepticons, this time, though, we kind of get like a remix of the little bit that happens at the end of the Season 1 and 3 intros, where we have Optimus with Bumblebee and Windblade just sort of like back to back, and then transforming and just heading out. This time, though, we get an extended version of that, where it's Optimus, Bumblebee, Windblade, accompanied by Wheeljack, Hot Rod, and Clobber, and all of them just start running to the right. And then follow that, we have all the Decepticons, which consists of Soundwave, Shadow Striker, Strika, I believe Skybite, Lockdown, and Wild Wheel, now on the right side, running towards the left, towards all the Autobots. They're running toward each other, looking like they're about to fight, before they suddenly turn and start running towards the screen instead to show that they're working together, when we see them fighting several upon several Tarn lookalikes, which emphasizes how Megatron X's Tarn lookalike forces are essentially the main bad guys in this episode. We also then cut to this really macabre shot of where Windblade is flying over a few more Tarn soldiers, battling them, when after Windblade passes by a screen, we see this huge pile of dead bodies of both Autobots and Decepticons alike, a lot of them including main characters. Like we see dead bodies of Bumblebee, Windblade, Wheeljack, Optimus, Shadow Striker, Soundwave, amongst like several other dead generic Autobots, Decepticons, and at the very top of the pile is Megatron X just standing menacingly over everyone, which is kind of a bit of a red herring considering that Megatron X doesn't really actually play a role in this episode. But it's interesting to see that I do love the imagery of this with Megatron X standing on top of all of the dead Autobots and Decepticons, including like main characters like Bumblebee and Optimus. It reminds me a lot of, just as someone who's a big Walking Dead fan, it reminds me a lot of one of the alternate covers from The Walking Dead issue 100, where Rick is standing on like on a huge pile of like all the major and minor characters who had died in the whole Walking Dead comic before then, which they actually paid homage to in the TV show, where Rick has like a dream sequence where he's just standing like in a room full of like dead bodies of like every main character throughout the entirety of the show, both alive and dead at that time. And honestly, I'm just a sucker for that kind of stuff where you have like a character standing on like the tops of the bunch of dead bodies of everyone who has died so far in that show, or just all the main characters, and like show maybe like that's like that main character's worst fear, just seeing all their friends just dead under them. I know it's really macabre talking about in a Transformers video, but I really, really love the imagery here. And then, of course, though, as it zooms in on Megatron X's face, we cut back to the similarly to the end of the Immobilizers intro, where we had the Alive Cybertron and the Bumblebee Cyberverse Adventures logo comes out. And honestly, this is without a doubt my favorite intro that Boulder Media has done for Cyberverse. If I had to rank them all, I know I said the one I did Immobilizers was my favorite, though, to be honest, that's kind of tied with the Season 2 one. I'd say my least favorite was Season 1, then Season 3, then Season 2, then the Immobilizers intro, and then this one for the Perfect Decepticon. This is without a doubt my favorite intro they've done ever for Cyberverse, and I'm so glad that this is the final one, since it ends it off on such a high note. So after that intro airs, we cut to where Optimus, Windblade, and Bumblebee are in like some sort of like war room, council room with Shadow Striker, Soundwave, and Striker, with both of them on talking to Wheeljack and Skybite on like a video call, essentially telling them to go ahead and put up a protective shield around Cybertron, similar to the one Megatron put up around the Decepticon half of Cybertron back in the other one, in an attempt to stop Megatron X's forces from invading. But this time, though, it covers the entirety of Cybertron. And while they're discussing like what they're going to do before Megatron X's forces, or whoever's Astro Train claimed to be worse than Megatron X, arrives, we get this funny scene where like all the Dinobots just barge into the war room, just wanting to be useful, saying that they want, like, they keep asking everyone they want to see them combine into Volcanicus. I mean, of course, Grimlock's trying to restrain them, but they were like all just so excited. But honestly, I understand Snarl, Slug, and Sludge doing this, but the fact that Swoop gets in on this too, I don't know, it seems like kind of a backpedaling of her characterization that we saw back in the Immobilizers. Just seems like they're dumbing her down a bit just for a good laugh. Though there is like a really funny moment here where eventually, after Grimlock gets all Dinobots out, we cut to him outside the war room, where several Autobots and Decepticons are talking, like wondering what could be happening. There's this really funny conversation between a bunch of generic Autobots and Decepticons, where one states that they think it's going to be the Quintessence again, another one who says that he heard from his friend Red 5, who you remember was the generic red Autobot that was named after the Star Wars Easter egg back in Season 2, Episode 13, Escape from Earth, that he believes it's Starscream's ghost is coming back, which is a nice little callback to how in several different Transformers shows, often Starscream's depicted as being like having an immortal spark that allows him to come back as a ghost. But the funniest part thing here happens when, again, the Dinobots who are now out of the war room are just going up to everyone they see, just asking if they want to see them combine. Eventually, though, they run into Hot Rod, who decides to go ahead and wants to see it. And really, we get this funny moment where just Volcanicus transforms and just showing off to Hot Rod, when Hot Rod decides to try and test like his fireproof abilities. So he shoots a bunch of fire at Volcanicus, who just absorbs it, and then just shoots it back at Hot Rod with his own flame sword. It's like a small little thing like that, but it's nice. It's to give more character to Volcanicus and the rest of the Dinobots as a result, considering even though we did get to see him for technically 4 episodes back in the Immobilizers, it is cool to have them have more screen time in this episode. But anyway, as they're all just like having fun waiting for the for the arrival of whatever threat is coming. Suddenly, several Tarn super soldiers start teleporting in through the shield, negating it just like they did back in the other one, into both, like, randomly in places on Cybertron and at the war room where Optimus, Bumblebee, Windblade, and all the other Decepticons are. However, as they arrive, though, the Tarn super soldiers don't actually fight them, but instead they start fighting each other, much to the confusion of everyone, until suddenly one Tarn super soldier, who is, like, missing an arm, and starts fighting as well, and tries to help out the Autobots, but eventually, though, the Autobot, I think it's Optimus and Bumblebee, manage to restrain two of the Tarn super soldiers when the one with only one arm shoots and kills them, which Optimus is confused by. And it's at this point that this Tarn super soldier announces that he is, in fact, Tarn, which, honestly, I'm so glad we actually have one called Tarn now, instead of just having to constantly call them the Tarn super soldiers, because they're literally all but Tarn in name. But now this one literally is Tarn. So Tarn eventually gives an explanation as to why all the other super soldiers are fighting each other, and that's because they were built to serve Megatron X and essentially be the perfect Decepticons. However, he states that after the events of the other one, Megatron X eventually did actually die inside Astrotrain, and after Megatron X died, all the Tarn super soldiers decided to go ahead and get payback by killing Astrotrain and sending him back into the main universe, which is what we saw at the start of this episode. However, with Megatron X dead now, the Tarn super soldiers didn't really have a master, so they were basically just fighting each other constantly until only one would remain, and that one would become the new leader of the Decepticons. So, however, Tarn states apparently that he does not want this. He wants to instead find a way to go ahead and free all these super soldiers from this, like, program that Megatron X subjected them to and allow them to live in peace. So Tarn states that the only way to do this is with an ancient artifact called the Cortex Helm, which will allow any Cybertronian wearing it to reprogram another Cybertronian. And while Optimus says that it's only a myth, Bumblebee has an idea on who can help them figure it out, and because of that, they head to the forest that we saw Thunderhowl in back in episode 19 of Season 3, which was also called Thunderhowl, to go ahead and find him. I gotta say, it's great to see Thunderhowl again, because just like him, Wild Wheel, and Meteorfire, but mostly Meteorfire and Thunderhowl, I love those two characters when they made their appearances back in their debut episodes in Season 3, and I was so happy to see him again play a major role in the final few episodes of Season 3, so to see Thunderhowl again play such a major role in the final episode of the series. Thunderhowl is honestly like one of my favorite characters in the show, despite the fact that he really only appears in it for maybe 5 episodes at most. But despite that, he still has such a huge impact on me, and I think he's such a great character in that. So Bumblebee heads to the forest with Optimus, Tarn, Shadow Striker, and everyone else to go ahead and get ready to find Thunderhowl, where Thunderhowl more clearly explains the story behind the Cortex Helm, stating that it was an object used by his last Prime, which was revealed to be Onyx Prime. So Thunderhowl agrees to lead Optimus, Tarn, and everyone else to it, where we get this really, really cool imagery, and what I believe is honestly the last pretty shot we will get in all of Cyberverse, where Bumblebee, Shadow Striker, and Thunderhowl and all of them are driving a Decepticon ship through like the sky above Cybertron, so where Thunderhowl just tells him to land, despite Shadow Striker not seeing anywhere to land. Thunderhowl says to do it anyway, and they eventually suddenly like freeze in the middle of the air as if there's something under them. So Bumblebee and Shadow Striker get out to take a look at it, and Bumblebee almost panics when he sees that he's just essentially walking on air, that literally nothing is keeping him up. There's this really, really cool shot where, I think it's from Bumblebee's point of view, where he's looking down at his own feet as Cybertron's under him, that just honestly is so, so beautiful to see. Just this huge like skyline shot of Cybertron. It looks absolutely beautiful. Again, this is the last time I'm going to gush about Boulder Media and how beautifully they made the background in Cyberverse, I swear to God. But honestly, the looks of Cyberverse in terms of its set design is top-notch, and I gotta give credit to Boulder Media for that. But anyway, despite the fact that there's nothing under them, Thunderhowl comes out telling Shadow Striker and Bumblebee not to be afraid, as they all get ready to head out and find the Cortex Helm, which Thunderhowl does by thrusting his sword into this invisible slot that's apparently up a bunch of stairs, and upon putting his sword in there, it basically reveals the Isles of Onyx Prime, which is where they are right now, and it's several of these interconnected floating rocks that slowly become more visible after he puts his sword in. And it's, again, the design is just so cool to see. Cyberverse has all these different environments that they've gone through throughout all 4 seasons, and have this be the last real big set piece that they'll ever do, it's such a fitting way to end it. Eventually, after going through a few more traps, the Autobots Decepticons, which consist of, at this point, Optimus, Bumblebee, Thunderhowl, Tarn, Shadow Striker, and Soundwave, all 6 of them end up heading to the door where the Cortex helm is, where Thunderhowl states that it's impossible to open unless someone has the Matrix of Leadership, which of course Optimus does. So he opens his chest up, grabs the Matrix Leadership, and then puts it into the slot of the door to open it where the Cortex helm is. It's at this point, though, where Tarn very obviously decides to betray the group to no one's surprise, and just steals the Cortex helm for himself. So when Tarn puts it on, he instead decides to not rewrite the Decepticon super soldiers for basically giving them the means to stop fighting, but instead just has them all follow him and acknowledge him as basically the new Alpha Decepticon. And honestly, everyone could have seen this coming if you know Tarn's whole shtick. But even though this isn't really Tarn's MO from the More Than Meets the Eye comics, it does make sense that, like, the dude is literally the perfect Decepticon, hence the name of this episode, so why wouldn't he not betray them? So after holding up Bumblebee, Thunderhowl, and Optimus, Tarn states that his plan is he's going to disregard the Autobot treaty with the Decepticons and basically just wipe out every single Autobot, so the Decepticons are the only ones standing, which is kind of a nice little callback to Megatron X's plan back in the other one, where he, though, stated that he already had the perfect Decepticon army with all the Tarn super soldiers, so he was just going to kill all Autobots and Decepticons. But Tarn, on the other hand, just wants to kill all the Autobots and then just get all the Decepticons to work for him. So Tarn, with this, decides to offer Shadow Striker and Soundwave the chance to come work for him, which they seem to both agree, much to Bumblebee and Thunderhowl's shock. But of course, though, you can tell based on their body language that obviously Shadow Striker and Soundwave are just playing along, trying to get the upper hand on Tarn in this process. So Tarn decides to take Soundwave and Optimus with him to go ahead and do some sort of public spectacle, while he leaves Shadow Striker to go ahead and kill Bumblebee and Thunderhowl, with leaving 2 other Decepticon super soldiers behind the process. So at this point, that Bumblebee is begging with Shadow Striker not to kill them both. And obviously, though, I will say, though, I just don't get, like, that Bumblebee would think that Shadow Striker would kill him, because there's actually, like, a point here where Shadow Striker is taking Bumblebee and Thunderhowl to the edge of the islands, where she plans to shoot them both off the island. She tells both the super soldiers to let go of them and spread out a bit, where she pulls her energon shotgun out, pointing at Bumblebee. And literally, when Bumblebee tells him not to let her grudge for him get in the way of him, Shadow Striker straight up calls him stupid before shooting both the Tarn super soldiers off instead, saying that if she was going to kill Bumblebee, she would have done it a while ago. And honestly, this is exactly how I felt in this moment, that Bumblebee has been with Shadow Striker at this point since the Quintessence arc, where they've shown to be working really well together. So why, at this point now, so far ahead, would Bumblebee still think that Shadow Striker would have some sort of vendetta against Bumblebee? It just seems a little bit odd, in my opinion, that Bumblebee just seems to have a lack of faith in Shadow Striker, despite everything they've seemed to have gone through at this point. But despite this, though, Shadow Striker states that she doesn't have much time to keep them busy, as the Tarn super soldiers will just teleport back up soon, and just kick Soundwave and Bumblebee off the, Thunderhowl and Bumblebee off the platform, so that they can go ahead and help Optimus and everyone down below. Meanwhile, back on Cybertron, Tarn and Soundwave have taken Optimus to the Cube Arena that we saw all the way back in Season 1, Episode 7, Cube, but Tarn states it's also the arena where Megatron fought as a gladiator, which we saw an episode before that in Megatron as My Hero, and basically, Tarn kind of says that he's going to give Optimus one chance to take him down, where he essentially starts up a broadcast to all the Autobots and Decepticons on Cybertron, stating that he's going to have Optimus fight off, like, several different other Decepticon super soldiers, and that if he can defeat all of them, then he'll get the chance to fight Tarn and maybe save Cybertron from him. But at the same time, though, it says to have all the Decepticons should now bow down to him as their new leader and kill off all the Autobots, calling off the Autobot-Decepticon treaty. And for a second, it seems as though the Decepticons are going to go along with it, as we see a bunch of generic Decepticons opening fire on a bunch of generic Autobots. But at the same time, we see other characters like Hot Rod and Windblade battling a few of the Decepticon super soldiers, where Hot Rod comes up with a plan to go ahead and gather up all the Autobots and Decepticons into one specific area, or gather all the Autobots, I should say, into one specific area that none of the Decepticon super soldiers can track them. And at first I thought this was McAdams because, of course, Iaconis had his cloaking field generator we saw back in Season 3. But no, it's actually somewhere I did not expect at all, and it's a really cool subversion. So Hot Rod and Windblade lead all the Autobots away, while Grimlock and the rest of the Dinobots transform into Volcanicus to stop them, to hold off the other Tarn super soldiers, to give Hot Rod's team enough time to escape. And I really wish we got a point here where we see a little bit of Volcanicus battling some of the super soldiers, but not a lot really, before it just cuts back to Optimus battling in the cube arena. And honestly, I really wish we got to see more of Volcanicus fight these Tarn super soldiers, but thankfully we do get that later on this episode in the big final fight. But just like of this little one moment where Volcanicus has to himself, I wish we got some more stuff here. So it's at this point where Optimus is really put through a huge gauntlet here, even worse than the one that Hot Rod, Clobber, and everyone had to deal with back during the, I believe it was the Prisoner, I think, in Season 3, when they had to all go through Iaconis. They had to go through the 500 training program levels. It's that 10 times worse. So Optimus starts off battling one Tarn super soldier, and that takes a bit out of him. When we see, like, by the time he's actually managed to kill that one, he's got like a few like little scuff marks and dents on him, but no like serious damage. And then though Tarn says to send in 2 more drones to fight him at once. This time though Optimus gets a little bit more beat up and stuff, but he does manage to seem to be holding off on his own, while we cut to see several other Autobots and Decepticons now battling trying to seemingly fight each other. There's this one point where Clobber, who is now an Autobot, as we saw back towards the end of Season 3, is battling off several of the Tarn super soldiers, begging to have Lockdown help her, who is there with Dead End and Wild Wheel. And while Lockdown seems to be wanting to save Clobber, considering they had a close friendship together back in Season 2 and even towards the later half of Season 3, Dead End and Wild Wheel don't seem interested on helping out at all, though this changes soon after, when one of the Tarn super soldiers gets very close to killing Clobber, and then Lockdown finally comes in and saves her. And it's great to have Lockdown finally get a moment to shine after just being relegated to sort of a joke character for most of Season 2, and of course we get more Wild Wheel and Dead End as well, who I was big fans of in this season as well, so more of them is always great. After Dead End, Lockdown, and Wild Wheel save Clobber and have them reunite with Hot Rod's group where they're heading off, we cut back to Optimus still in the cube arena battling the Tarn super soldiers, and he's taking quite the beating from all them. At this point, his armor is a lot more damaged now at this point. I'm pretty sure one of his windshields gets cracked either here or like a little bit, and his face is all cut up too. And honestly, this is like the most brutal I've seen Cyberverse get since the Season 2 of this show, and we all know what happened during then. But man, this is even like the worst of it for Optimus. Optimus gets it so much worse. Like, even though his all armor, except his battle mask, is a bit broken now too, eventually, even though he manages to kill both those Tarn super soldiers, and then I think he fights like 2 more as well at this point, but like he fights in like the first 2, then another 2 come in. This time Tarn has like 3 come in, then 6, and Optimus is just getting himself beat up constantly, and it's honestly like painful to watch almost. But at the same time, while Optimus is just letting himself get beat up by all these Tarn super soldiers, which there's this one like oddly darkly funny moment where Shadow Striker is brought in by the 2 Decepticon super soldiers that she shot off after freeing Bumblebee and Thunderhowl, where Tarn is basically chastising Shadow Striker for betraying him, and you just see in the background that the other Tarn super soldiers are just kicking and punching Optimus on the ground. And even though this is supposed to be like a really dark and serious scene, I couldn't help but laugh a little bit just in the background, that while this serious conversation is happening between Tarn and Shadow Striker, you see the other 2 super soldiers just beating up Optimus like 2 school bullies beating up a kid in the school playground. It reminds me a lot of that. But eventually though, it seems as though Tarn decides to order Soundwave this time to kill Shadow Striker, where Shadow Striker chastises Soundwave for being so easily to obey other Decepticons. Though it seems as though Soundwave gives some sort of clue to Shadow Striker that he's actually not going along with Tarn, that he's just playing along so that he can get the upper hand on him, which Shadow Striker seems to understand. Though, so when it seems like Soundwave's going to go ahead and shoot Shadow Striker, he gives Optimus enough time to actually fight back a bit against the now 3 or 4 Tarn soldiers that he's fighting at this point, and throws like 1 or 2 of them into Soundwave and Tarn, stunning them and giving Shadow Striker enough time to escape. So while Shadow Striker escapes, we cut back to finally where Hot Rod, has led all the other Autobots to. And turns out it is none other than the Valley of Repugnance, which is where he and Drift had their battle in Battle for Cybertron Part 3 back in Season 3. And of course, where we saw Bumblebee and Grimlock have their little misadventures with Affluous' city in Episode 22, Journey to the Valley of Repugnance. So essentially, Hot Rod states that because it's so deep under Cybertron, none of Tarn's super soldiers will think about heading here. And it's where Hot Rod essentially tries to rally all the Autobots alongside Windblade, saying that they don't need to essentially fight off the entirety of Tarn's forces, but instead just need to focus on getting to Tarn and removing the cerebral cortex from his head. So therefore, all of his super soldiers basically won't be following him anymore. So as they figure out how they're going to do that, Wheeljack announces that he took out one of the teleporter components from one of the Tarn super soldiers that Clobber had killed. And so therefore he decides to reverse engineer it so that everyone gets a teleporter. That way they can just teleport straight to the Cube Arena where Optimus and Tarn are without having to fight their way through all of the other ones. And that leads to what I believe is without a doubt the best 10 to 15 minutes finale of a Cyberverse so far. And it's easily without a doubt my favorite battle in all of Cyberverse right here, this final battle here. So as Hot Rod and Wheeljack and all the other Autobots get ready to go ahead and teleport into this Cube Arena, we see now that Optimus once again has managed to, despite the huge injuries he sustained at this point with a cracked windshield, his whole mask and face is busted up, and one of his arms is malfunctioning, he still manages to kill all the other Tarn super soldiers, which, honestly, credit to you, Optimus, man. You are a real determinator, man. But eventually then Tarn sends in just 5 more super soldiers to battle him, and Optimus can barely just keep down at this point because he's totally exhausted at this point. And as they all hold Optimus down with Tarn getting ready to kill him, suddenly Hot Rod and all the other Autobots teleport in, basically saying that they're not going to let Tarn kill Optimus and to conquer Cybertron. But Tarn states instead that he has the support of not only the other Tarn super soldiers, but the entirety of the Decepticon army at their side, which we see all the other Decepticons come in, seeming like they're getting ready to fight all the Autobots as well, until we see Shadow Striker come out of all of them, where we see that in the time that Soundwave had let Shadow Striker go, she managed to rally all the other Decepticons into joining the Autobots, stating that they enjoy the peace more and instead want to help fight them against Tarn. So, at this point, all-out chaos ensues as we get into the final fight of this entire show, where all the Autobots Decepticons are battling Tarn and his forces, and this is just 5 to 10 minutes of just pure, unadulterated chaos and violence, and it's just so good. We get moments where literally every character that we've seen throughout the entire 4 seasons gets to shine. We see Windblade battling several characters, Tarn soldiers, teleporting all over the place using her wind turbines to blow them all away. Hot Rod's running between all of them, shooting fire at everyone. Wheeljack gets to mess around a little bit with his inventions. We even get 10 seconds of screen time where Meteor Fire and Cosmos battle 2 of the drones, where Meteor Fire uses his little energy gauntlet things, the little Wolverine claws he's got, or the hidden blades, I should say, that we saw him use back in Alien Hunt. And as someone who, Meteor Fire is my favorite out of all those 3 characters, like him, Thunderhowl, and Wowwheel, I'm so glad Meteor Fire got a little bit of time to shine, even if it was only 10 seconds. Just having him and Cosmos battle a few Decepticons, it was just so much fun. We see Shadow Striker battling as well, Lockdown and Clobber working together, Cup working. There's this one part where where RC's riding Chromia and they're battling, shooting at all the Decepticons, and wait, that sounded extremely wrong and out of context. I take that back. Where RC is on top of Chromia. No, that just sounds worse. Alright, so whatever. RC's just riding Chromia, and they're just she's just shooting at all the Decepticons. Grimlock and all the other Dinobots turn to Volcanicus. We get a great moment where all of them are battling too, and it's just so much fun where all of them are fighting while Hot Rod manages to save Optimus from the soldiers that were going to kill him, and it's just so much fun to see all of these Autobots and Decepticons come together for this big final showdown. And it's without a doubt, I thought the Battle for Cybertron final battle was my favorite big battle. But no, this one blows it out of the water and is just absolutely perfect. However, despite it seeming to be in the fight seeming to be in the odds of the Autobots and Decepticons against Tarn, Tarn's forces do manage to gain the upper hand though, and actually end up taking down most of the Decepticons and Autobots. There's even this one point where I was really surprised to see there's 5 or 4 different super soldiers that jump on top of Volcanicus to pin him down, and it's really crazy to see just how strong Tarn is at this point, that his forces can easily even take down the huge Volcanicus, who we saw was able to pretty much go toe-to-toe with Trypticon, who was the strongest character that we had to deal with at this point. And it's just so cool to see just how, like, all these Autobots and Decepticons working together. They had to work together to even come close to taking down Tarn. But despite that, even though that they had the upper hand just because they had the surprise element with the teleporters that Wheeljack created for them all, despite that though, Tarn is still able to take them out. And so at this point, he finally pins down Optimus and Bumblebee, getting ready to kill them both and order all the Tarn Super Soldiers to kill them and the other rebelling Decepticons. When Hot Rod tries to go ahead and make another sacrifice similar to the one he did where he saved Bumblebee and Cheetor from Drift back in Season 3, where he runs out of nowhere, seemingly having dodged all the other Tarn Super Soldiers, and attempts to try and forcibly rip off the Cortex helm from Tarn's head. Though eventually, at this point, that Tarn just straight up beats the ever-loving shit out of Hot Rod. And I'm not mincing words here. He literally beats him to near death at this point with like 2 punches. So at first it seems as though Hot Rod's actually gonna pull it off when Tarn just, like, I think he does a reverse headbutt, knocking Hot Rod off him, and then he straight up punches him in the face so hard, he gives him like a black eye that like dents it, like caves his face in a little bit. And when I saw that, I was like, Jesus, not even Megatron's beating of Starscream was that brutal. And look at, like, compared to that, like, it took Megatron like a good 30-second beatdown of Starscream to do like a huge amount of damage to Starscream back in that episode, all the way back in Bad Moon Rising. Like, here, look. It took Megatron all that time to just utterly ruin Starscream's body, but here, Tarn smashes in Hot Rod's face with 1 punch, smashing his face. His whole armor's dusted up. He's got a really bad black eye that looks like just to me at least, looks like his whole, like, that whole side of his face is caved in a bit, and then he just punches him 1 more time, straight up knocking him out. And it's at this point we get this really cool point where after Tarn nearly beats Hot Rod to death, mind you, he's doing this all with 1 arm, by the way. He still hasn't gotten his other arm repaired, where Soundwave just absolutely loses it. And I guess I can see now why everyone ships Cyberverse Hot Rod and Soundwave together, because clearly Soundwave is now enraged that seemingly Tarn has killed Hot Rod, so he breaks free of the 2 Tarn drones that were holding him captive and just launches himself at Tarn, now actually managing to rip off the Cortex helm from Tarn's head. He puts on for a little bit, presumably stopping all of the Tarn drones, but then Tarn knocks out Soundwave and gets the helm back on, getting ready to kill Soundwave and everyone else. But I think he goes to kill Hot Rod, actually, which further just emphasizes just how close Soundwave and Hot Rod have gotten together after the events that they endured as leading the anti-Quintessence resistance back in Season 3. But where Soundwave finally decides to go ahead and sacrifices himself in an effort to kill Tarn, where he overloads himself after he was beaten down by Tarn to give one last Soundwave inferior quote, which, alright Tarn, alright Soundwave, I'll let you have this one. And Soundwave puts all of his energy into one, like, super Soundwave that basically causes the whole cube arena to, like, explode in this bright white light that presumably kills Tarn in the process. So, it's at this point, though, that all the other Autobots and Decepticons get up and they see that all the other Tarn drones are just, like, have stopped holding and fighting all the Autobots and Decepticons and are just standing there aimlessly. And I think it's Windblade and Bumblebee who are just looking around wondering what's happened when one of the Tarn drones explains that Soundwave had used the Cortex helm to essentially remove all of Tarn's programming from them, allowing them to finally have their own free will and such. So, as Hot Rod and Optimus get up, who literally look like they've been through the ringer at this point, Hot Rod tries to get ready to thank Soundwave for helping when they see a smoldering large crater where Soundwave and Tarn were, and we learned that Soundwave sacrificed himself to save Tarn. And honestly, Soundwave's death was really well done. I can't say I was the biggest, Soundwave's death moved me as much as Cheetor's did back in the start of Season 3, like his and Hot Rod sacrifices, but it is still really sad to see Soundwave die like this, but I think it was a really fitting death for him as well. The absolute killer, though, was when Laserbeak is just flying around the crater where Soundwave was, and you just hear him screech in agony, like really sadly after like realizing that Soundwave's dead. And it leaves it on this really bittersweet note that yes, they managed to kill Tarn and free all of his super soldiers from his programming, but they lost Soundwave in the process, who was the leader of the Decepticons at this point. And honestly is a really cool way callbacking to another version of Soundwave's Death, which I'm not going to reveal just for spoilers in case any of you haven't read or watched that instance of Soundwave dying. But if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And honestly, this was just a perfect way. From how brutal this fight was, we got to see literally every Autobot and Decepticon work well together. The absolute beatdown that Tarn gives to Hot Rod, which really, really shocked me. And then, of course, Soundwave sacrificing himself for Hot Rod and everyone else. Absolutely the best fight in Cyberverse, in my opinion. We then cut to, presumably, I'd say maybe like a few hours after this, where Hot Rod and all the other Autobot Decepticons are giving a eulogy for Soundwave at McAdams, where Hot Rod's basically just saying, like, all the stuff that he did as a Decepticon. And it's cool to see just how everyone here is just seeming so fond of Soundwave, despite all the bad stuff he did back in seasons 1 through, like, the first half of season 3. He even mentions back to Clobber how Soundwave tried to have Clobber kill Hot Rod back in the earlier parts of the Quintessent arc, which, again, I'll never understand why Clobber decided to go ahead and listen to Soundwave's order to try and kill Hot Rod, but it's nice to see that they're able to joke about it at this point, at least. But Hot Rod states that Soundwave truly was the perfect Decepticon, as the title implies, and though that they'll all remember him for the sacrifice and how he saved them all from Tarn. When we see Shadow Striker is now in control of Laserbeak, and seemingly she is now the new leader of Decepticons, which I'm so glad to see, because Shadow Striker was honestly my favorite Decepticon in the entire show. So I'm glad to see that she finally gets, like, as the new head of Decepticons, and really seems to fit that, in my opinion. So as they're all celebrating, we see Bumblebee head out of McAdams to see Optimus, who is now recovered as well alongside Hot Rod, where he sees Optimus just staring up at the sky, aimlessly. So Bumblebee asks Optimus what he's going to do at this point, where essentially the two of them are just talking, like, what now that the war's over, what they're going to do with their lives. And honestly, I think this sets up a great epilogue to Cyberverse as a whole, where now finally war's peace has been returned to Cybertron, and seemingly all the big threats are dealt with. Megatron X is dead, Tarn is dead, Decepticons and Autobots are together now, Trypticon is frozen forever. Really, the only thing that's really, the only, like, rogue factor here is probably, like, Sound Blaster and his mercenaries that are still out there somewhere in space, but they're not going to be, like, a big threat compared to Tarn or Megatron X. So, while Bumblebee is talking to Optimus, Optimus states that he's actually going to retire as Prime, which shocks Bumblebee, but he states that he knows now that Bumblebee and the rest of the Autobots and Decepticons are more than capable of protecting Cybertron on their own, and that he'll just go ahead and enjoy the rest of his life in peace, which, honestly, I think that's a cool way of subverting expectations, because literally usually every other Transformers show ends with Optimus dying, either sacrificing himself to save Cybertron or just being killed by Megatron in the last few episodes. So to see Optimus now seemingly just being at peace and wanting the chance to actually just relax for once, it feels very fitting in character for Cyberverse Optimus, who just wanted to try to relax, as we saw him do earlier on in Season 3, where he was helping out all the restoration projects. Now he actually gets to do that. It's really cool to see that. And then, of course, Windblade and Hot Rod end up coming outside as well, where they all have, this group hug together. And, again, it's really cool that Bumblebee, Hot Rod, Windblade, and Optimus are, the final 4 people to end this show on, because, honestly, all of these characters were the main characters of Cyberverse, if you really want to say that. Bumblebee, of course, you could argue, was the main character of the whole show, specifically mostly in seasons 1 and 2 and towards the end of season 3. Hot Rod, he had had a pretty major role in the latter half of season 2, and of course he was the main character of the Quintessent arc in season 3. Windblade, of course, was alongside Bumblebee the main character of season 1. She was kind of relegated to a minor character in season 2, and then was just a MacGuffin for most of season 3, but she did play a major role in these 4 episodes. Then, of course, Optimus has had his own stuff to deal with throughout all 4 seasons. And then, of course, actually, Shadow Striker comes in as well, who doesn't seem into the group hug until Hot Rod convinces her to. And honestly, having Shadow Striker there as the new leader of the Decepticons, and just seems to be in the loop now as one of the main characters alongside Optimus, Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and Windblade, is really fitting in my opinion. So it just ends with all of them in a group hug together, accompanied by Grimlock and the rest of the Dinobots when they see everyone out there hugging. And it's honestly just a perfect end to Cyberverse, because yes, while it feels like the story is Cyberverse is definitely over at this point, that there's no more threats, pieces on Cybertron, seems like everyone's like gonna be able to have a normal life now, it still feels like despite the show is over now, the world of Cyberverse can still go on. That if someone really wanted to, you can just say, oh yeah, Bumblebee and Windblade are now working on Cybertron, just leading the Autobot side of Cybertron. Maybe they're working with Shadow Striker, who's helping things out with the Decepticon side. Maybe Hot Rod's out, maybe trying to make some like shrine to, or like memorial shrine for Soundwave. Maybe like trying to find some way to honor him. And then you can just think of several different things that can open up new story opportunities in the world of Cyberverse. And I think that's what makes a good ending so good, is that you can have a story end, but just because the story ends doesn't mean that the world ends as well. So just because the story of Cyberverse is over, it's not like, oh, well, that's it. Now we just, the world's over now, so all the Autobots and Decepticons are just dead, or they're just not going to do anything for the rest of their time. But no, you can still feel like, okay, so even though the show is over, they've still got their own lives ahead. They get to go ahead and live out their own lives now. And I think that really just shows just how good this ending is, not just for Season 4, but the entire series as a whole. And so that was finally my final review of Transformers Cyberverse with Season 4, Episode 2, The Perfect Decepticon. And I think this goes without saying, this is without a doubt the best episode of Cyberverse after the Battle for Cybertron arc. Easily, I gave Battle for Cybertron 100 out of 10. This episode, I'm going to give it 1,000 out of 10, or even, like, infinite out of 10. This is, without a doubt, a perfect finale to the entire Transformers Cyberverse series. We get so many good points where we get closure on Megatron X's storyline, great little moments with Bumblebee, Thunderhowl. Every character, I feel like, that is important to Cyberverse got a time to shine this episode. The final fight where all the Autobots and Decepticons work together to battle Tarn's forces is absolutely, like, breathtaking in terms of fights. It's so brutal and epic at the same time, where Optimus has to go through the gauntlet of battling, like, a dozen Tarn drones. Even Tarn beating Hot Rod the near death like Megatron did the Starscream back in Season 2. And even, of course, Soundwave's really heroic sacrifice to kill Tarn. It's all just so perfect, and without a doubt, this is the best way to end Cyberverse. And I want to give a shout out for this being the final review of Cyberverse. I want to give a shout out to everyone who worked on the show, whether it be the cast, like Jeremy Levy as Bumblebee, Jetfire, and everyone else, Mark Thompson as Megatron, Skybite, and Tarn, Jake Fushi as Optimus, all of you guys. You guys absolutely killed it voicing all these characters, and honestly, this show wouldn't be entertaining as it was without you guys, and especially the cast and crew, like Meg Katz, Gavin Hignite. All of you guys wrote incredible stuff, even though there were a few slip-ups every now and then earlier on, but you guys definitely found your footing by the time Season 3 started, and honestly, I don't regret starting this show at all. I think this is easily, without a doubt, one of the best shows in all of Transformers franchise, easily up there with Prime, Animated, Beast Wars, and so on, and I think you all should be so proud of this show. So, honestly now that we've done, I can't really rate all of Season 4 considering it's just 2 episodes, but I think what I can do is go ahead and rate the entirety of Transformers Cyberverse now. So, if I had to rate the entire show of Transformers Cyberverse, that's including Seasons 1, 2, 3, and these last 2 episodes of Season 4, what would I give this show? Now, I will admit, Season 1 had sort of a weak start, but it did have a few good episodes in there. Season 2 was much better, but did also have a few slip-ups, but Season 3 and 4 were absolutely incredible. With Cyberverse as a whole show, I would probably give Cyberverse an 8.5 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. Easily, without a doubt, one of the best, like, easily top 3 Transformers shows in my opinion. I absolutely loved Cyberverse from start to finish, even though it had some trouble of getting itself situated in the first 2 seasons. Without a doubt, Cyberverse is easily a great show, and despite the fact that it borrows a lot from other incarnations of Transformers, they do go ahead and try to make their own things with the show later on down the line, and I'm really happy to see that Cyberverse wasn't just a show for kids. It really felt like, yes, it's definitely still designed for kids, but it's not like Rescue Bots, something like that, where only kids can enjoy it. Easily, anyone of all ages can watch Cyberverse and enjoy it, in my opinion. I think it's a great show. If you haven't watched it already, definitely give it a try, because it's without a doubt a fantastic Transformers show, and I'm so glad I got to see it through. But there we go, that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 4, Episode 2, The Perfect Decepticon, and the entirety of Transformers Cyberverse as a whole. Thank you all so much for watching my reviews of it over the past 4 years, and, well, mostly these past 4 months, and it means so much to me that I managed to finish this now. We now have a whole review series done under my belt, and I can be really proud of that. But this isn't the end of my Cyberverse review content. I do have a few other Cyberverse reviews, or it's not Cyberverse reviews, they're just Cyberverse videos coming in the near future that I am excited to talk about later on down the line. Maybe I'll make a little update video over next week at some point. But definitely, this is going to be goodbye for now for Cyberverse videos. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And fun fact, as I was recording my review for the Season 3 finale, I actually got in the mail my Streamily autograph from Jeremy Levy, the voice of Bumblebee, thanking me for all the reviews I've done. So, again, Jeremy Levy, if you're watching this, thank you so much for the autograph. It means the world to me, and thank you so much for, again, just loving my Cyberverse reviews alongside all of you other guys who watch them as well. You guys mean the world to me, and it makes me so happy that people are out there enjoying my reviews. So, until next time, this is Autobot Sonic. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe. I will see you guys later. And one last time, take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.
And I might know what our future, but then you still control the past. Only you know if you be together. Only you know if we shall.